All right, welcome to another edition of the Tabletop Miniature Hobby Podcast. It's the 1000th episode. I've always wanted to say that. It's not the 1000th episode. It's like the 35th or something. I've just always wanted to say that. I'm joined on this episode by Ryan, all the way out in, was it Alberta, Canada, you said?
Yes, yeah, it's Alberta, Canada.
And nice and warm there, time of recording I hear.
Oh, so warm. Just a balmy negative 18 Celsius.
Yeah, I mean, this is an audio-only podcast, so nobody will see this, but Ryan's sitting outside in his garden. He's got a pair of trunks on. He's painting a miniature. In his trunks, there's icicles hanging from his nose as well, so it's you'll need to take a selfie and we could post that in the show notes.
Yeah, I'll get right on that.
So I see behind you, again, this doesn't work very well in audio, but I see you've got a big collection of stuff behind you there. So is that all the hobby gear there that we could see, or that I could see?
Yeah. It's an assortment. I got everything from a tabletop game, Warhammer, but then I did a lot of role-playing games, Pathfinder, Dungeons and Dragons, stuff like that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then
do
novels.
you get a lot of? Do you get a lot of time or regular time to do hobby related stuff then?
Yeah. For myself, mostly building. I'm still working on videos. They take longer than you think.
Yeah, the creating content around it, that's a thing. Like, we'll maybe touch on that, but it like times us by, I don't know, 4 or 5 the amount of times it takes to do anything if you're documenting it and publishing stuff about it, doesn't it? But I do find it quite rewarding because it kind of, it's just another wing to what you're sort of creating as well.
Yeah, very much so. I find, it does take longer when you have to record everything, and then in the end, I will record easy 3 hours of product and maybe use 20 minutes. It's very interesting. And then half of it I just voice over because the audio is just me putzing and listening to YouTube.
So you're running a YouTube channel then. Tell us a bit about that.
Yeah. I started like a lot of people during COVID. What was it? 2021 in May. It's nothing big. It's a little over 500 people. It's growing. It's kind of just a hobby right now, but I'd love to keep taking it and make it a full-time job. But that takes time, and I know that. And I think anything worth doing is worth doing right. So if it takes time, it's worth it in the end. There's no quick get-rich-quick schemes that are worth it, I think. So if you can take your time, build your fan base, build your community, and have fun, and do it right, I think it's worth it in the end.
Yeah, getting into it for the right reasons. Yeah, definitely. Not like me getting into this podcast. I just thought I'd be a millionaire by now. That's not happened, obviously. So I just have to keep working away. What's the like core theme of your YouTube channel, if any? Is there particular styles of stuff or games that you cover, or?
Mostly just terrain. So building the terrain for tabletop games, Rangers, the Shadow Deep, stuff like that. Frostgrave, Mordheim even. That's a big one right now. I was able to get in a game on the weekend, actually. So that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, Mordheim, yeah. So how did that all go for you then? Have you played that before?
I have, yeah. Sadly, I started into the hobby in 2001, so I missed the initial Mordheim launch, and I didn't find out about it until it was a dead war game. And I actually stumbled upon, and you can't see it, but I do actually own a copy of the book, which I've been told it's a big flex when you can own the actual copy, so I was pretty happy about that.
How do you find it? How do you find it in comparison with Frostgrave? Because I know that a lot of people say, Frostgrave is basically the tribute to, and that's maybe unfair to Frostgrave. It's a game in its own right, but there are parallels, obviously.
There's a lot of similarities. I kind of, in my head, I coined a phrase, Mordgrave.
Good.
Because they're very similar. You can use a setting. You could use Felstad. the frozen city as Mordheim or Mordheim in skirmish game, low model count, a lot of fun. And you can have the board do stuff. There is early rules that Mordheim would allow. There was random tables, stuff like that. Not as many as Frostgrave, but yeah, it's comparable.
Why do you think Mordheim is still getting play all these years later?
I'd say the aesthetic. Just the look, the feel. It had a lot of big names, like John Blanche was the artist overseeing it, and a few other people. I can't remember all the names, but yeah, I think, and COVID really kind of, I think, skyrocketed. So before COVID, it was known, but when COVID hit, everyone just kind of dove into their hobbies, and it kind of took off.
So how long have you been actively playing it then? Just since COVID?
Yeah, myself recently, just since COVID. I played early on with my brother when I found the book. We tried it out, had some fun, even played with a few friends. But then it kind of got put on the wayside, and yeah, I just recently pulled it back out and was mucking about, and then I found a group that was in my city here in Edmonton. And I joined up on the group on Facebook, and I've now had 2 whole games in. So
great stuff. And when you join up a group like that, you're obviously getting together with folks that you don't know straight away. You'll get to know them, obviously. So how have you found that in terms of like who's bringing all the gear, who's doing the bulk of the prep? Is it pretty hard to get together with someone you don't necessarily know and set up a game like this and execute it?
It can be daunting. I know for myself, it's definitely anxiety inducing, just to do with a few situations that happened to me, in the last 2 years. But yeah, I went on Sunday to a gentleman's house that I've never even met. It was, and there was 2 other guys that I knew there that I played with before, but yeah, I contacted him and said, hey, and he's like, yeah, I'm hosting it. And I showed up and we played and had a lot of fun. I think that we have a common ground. It will tie you together. You can start joking and laughing with them way easier than if you didn't have that common like gaming ground. That's that fun connection. Unlike, like, what do you do for a job? I collect pennies, or something silly or something. But no, you're connecting over a game. Like, I don't know what any of them even do for a job. Like, we're having fun. So I think that's a big help for people.
So is that something you'll do regular now that you've kind of joined that group?
That's the plan. I know in the new year, a lot of them want to start an actual campaign. So that's kind of fun. Actually get down to the brass tacks, and that's what Mordheim's all about. So
what when you got together, did you bring some of your terrain in that just to help fill out the table?
I did. There's 4 of us that played, and of the 4 of us, I think 3 of us had terrain, and we just made a board and played. It was just kind of let's try this and let's try that. And
so you'll be a good addition to the group if you're literally creating terrain on YouTube and stuff like that. You'll have a big collection of stuff that you could get on the table, wouldn't you?
My collection's not as big as I'd like. I want more. I'm in the middle of crafting a large terrain piece for Mordheim and Frostgrave and many other skirmish games. So that's a lot of fun. It's a lot of work, but in the end, I think it's going to be worth it. So,
do you have a general pacing for how quickly and how regularly you're making certain terrain pieces, or is it totally dependent on what you're working on?
It's dependent on what I'm working on. I have at least 3 videos on the go right now, and 3 of them are done. I have one for sci-fi buildings. That's in the process. They're all assembled. They just need to be painted. Then I'm working on the Mordheim train, and then from the Discord, one of the guys mentioned old cactuses from the 90s, those styrofoam balls. And I'm like, yeah, I can make those. So I thought I'll just record them up, and so they're almost painted and ready. So I thought it'd be fun to do because I've never done them. So
the big thing for me with terrain is always the fear I get around it is the storage. Like if I accumulate lots of terrain, it needs to be stored, and it's not as easy as just storing miniatures. How have you navigated those troubled waters?
I'm very fortunate. I was able to get a space in my house. I call it the lair, and it's my space. The wife doesn't interfere down here. It is taken up by the freezer also, but you got to make sacrifices. So I have. Yeah,
well, you get your steaks in there as well.
Oh yeah, I got some good steaks. The father-in-law's a butcher, so good. I get the Excellent. Good stuff. Yeah. But yeah, I have a lot of shelves behind me, as you can see. Obviously, they can't. But yeah, Billy bookcases is the way to go.
Can you think of a piece of terrain that you put together that like was almost no cost and took you very, very little time, but just turned out really, really well?
I don't know about no time, but my pillars, I really like them. They're sci-fi pillars, like concrete pillars that I made for the channel. It was for one of the Stargrave missions. I made them up, and they're just made of foam core and covered with like a spackle, like wall spackle and paint. And for me, it didn't take much time, but I know people who are like, well, that's so hard to make. I'm like, for me, it was easy.
Yeah. Is the fact that you're making terrain, is that aided by like anything you do in your day job, or any backgrounds in any trades or anything that you've developed these skills, or is it purely through the hobby?
Well, I played with Lego when I was a kid. Does that count?
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah, it's building. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I've always enjoyed building things with my hands. That's just how I am. I'm very tactile in that regards. Building Legos to sandcastles, building tree forts when you're younger, kind of thing. But then I got into welding. I'm actually a journeyman welder. I haven't welded in a while due to just circumstances. But so yeah, I do have building training, so it definitely helps.
With so you've talked about like the games that you're in, and these are games that are very terrain heavy. What came first, the love for terrain or the love for those games, or vice versa?
Kind of at the same time. When I started playing in 2001, I got into a Warhammer 40K, and I started with Space Marines, and I sucked. My dice rolls were terrible, but I had fun, and I think that's the part of the joy of the hobby is it didn't matter if I was winning or losing. I was still having fun because I was hanging with friends. So, and I started building terrain, the classic pop can train. That was some of my first stuff, like refinery stuff. And then eventually the biggest piece I made was with a fellow gamer and really close friend, was a board. We made was it a 6x4 board with a styrofoam plywood. We carved a river into it, colored it, painted it, took our time, added sand. Yeah. And that was the biggest piece. And as far as I know, the gaming group that we were in, they're still using it to this day. So, so that's pretty cool.
Yeah. I always part of me loves the thought of having a 6x4, really well-designed table. And then the other part of me thinks fighting over the same river again, I suppose it would depend how often you were playing on it, wouldn't it? If you were doing loads of regular games, you'd be like, here we are at the river again. Every inch of the table sort of thing.
Yeah, very much so. And that's where I've struggled with terrain. I want to make it modular. So if you dive in and you're like, oh yeah, I love Frostgrave, and I'm going to make all my terrain this wintry scape. Well, now all your terrain pieces have snow on it, and you're like, well, and now I need a river, and it's supposed to be summer and spring or whatever, well, then it kind of looks weird. So if you can make a generic, basic terrain, it's easier to use your mind's eye to play, just like how you were using those blocks in your Rangers game, which I loved. That was amazing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we've used them twice now. So it was the bridge guard scenario where the concept, you've maybe played this scenario yourself, but they're not supposed to see you until the alarm's raised. So yeah, for anyone who hasn't seen the picture, I just used the wooden blocks it was supposed to be all rocks and stuff like that, and it looks a bit funny when you start, but once you roll the first dice, like, those wooden blocks vanish in your mind's eye. Like you're saying, it becomes, it's rocks, it's trees. We did it recently with that on Blood Moon with the Manor House, because we needed access to the inside of a building, and it was just like the perimeter was laid out with the blocks. So it doesn't jump out at you visually to start with, but once you start playing, you forget about that, don't you?
Yeah, very much so. And I find with terrain, in the end, as long as you guys are having fun, the terrain doesn't matter. Like I know you've talked about the flat pieces. If that's all you have and you live in a small apartment, use that. It's about being smart with your time, and storage for some people, they don't have storage, where I'm very fortunate. I know as I make more pieces, I'm going to need more storage, and that's going to be a big problem. So I've already started to think on that a little, but yeah, invest in Rubbermaids and maybe a storage unit.
Yeah, that just opened my sort of terrain library where people could hire the stuff for a while. Have you ever like sold any terrain? Have you ever made anything for anyone else or that? Or?
No, I haven't done anything like that. Everything I've made so far is my kind of mine right now so far. Mm-hmm. As I build more, maybe I'll start giving it away. But right now, it becomes mine, and it's kind of serves dual purpose for the channel.
Working on all that terrain, then do you still get the opportunity to do the miniature painting and collecting and that? Like, what sort of stuff are you working on there at the moment?
I am. I'm working on my actual warband for Mordheim right now, actually. I had a whole Skaven army when I finally was getting into near the end of my gaming groups back when we started. And I had Skaven, so I'm like, I've just turned them in now into individual models instead of units. And I've been working on them and painting them up. I haven't painted them yet, but they're primed, ready to take some paint. A few of them.
And are they Games Workshop?
They are Games Workshop.
Ago, yeah.
Yeah, I actually was looking through my large bits box and found that I had a whole 20-man squad of, I think, gutter runners or whatever they're called. I can't remember exactly. And I'm like, where did they come from? Like, usually happens with most minis. Like, hey, surprise to me.
Yeah. It's a good wee treat when you find something that you either barely remember or just don't remember at all.
Yeah, very much so.
Is that exclusively what you're doing at the moment then, a Skaven warband?
No, I have so many minis on the go right now. I'm working on some orcs, 40k orcs that I've had sitting for forever. They're primed and ready to go. I just need to start painting those ones too. I found some old Necron that I had kicking around, so I was working on those too. So, and then of course I have a lot of minis for like Dungeons and Dragons and stuff too that I'm working on too. So
do you buy stuff, like buy new miniatures from companies out with Games Workshop and that, or?
I haven't bought. Actually, no, wait. Sorry, I have bought recently from Games Workshop, and it's the first time in forever. I bought one of the Kill Teams box sets. Gives you kind of 2 war bands, gives you some terrain, some dice. I'll probably never play the game, but the minis are nice. Games Workshop is
was it two factions you get with it then?
Yeah. It was the Orcs, which is one of my favorites, and then the Steel Legion, I believe. It's the Kill Team starter box, so a lot of people know that one. So,
but you don't reckon you'll play it, the game itself? Will you maybe just do a Stargrave or that instead?
Probably do Stargrave. I'll probably use them in Stargrave because it'd be more fun, and I know those rules better. And I could probably find someone to play Stargrave where I don't know anyone to play Kill Team right now. So,
do you have a Games Workshop near you?
There's 2 in the city actually, and there's multiple hobby stores too. So
when you're buying stuff, do you go to those shops, or do you tend to do like online orders, or does it just depend?
It depends. I like to support local. I think that's a lot of people do, but then there's a lot of times where I'll order from Amazon or right from the company.
I've found it. I've started looking a lot more on Etsy these days. Like, I've picked up some good stuff on there. There's just like you could get anything hobby wise on there, because there's always somebody making a 3D print or that. And some of the stuff I got, like, it's really good quality. Like, I got some mushroom terrain for adding into bases and that, and it's really good stuff. Like,
nice. Yeah, no, Etsy is the way to go if you don't have a 3D printer and you really want something, I find, or as I mentioned in one of my videos, even you can buy like styrofoam bricks off of Etsy, anything to help with your hobby even. So
with your YouTube channel then, so is it all like terrain making videos? Have you ever done like any gameplay stuff or painting miniatures or that? Or
I've done mostly terrain. I've done a little bit of painting. I did a little my normal guy review of the speed paints by Army Painter. So I did a little painting on that. That was actually a lot of fun. It's something I strongly encourage people to get. The speed paints are amazing, and I know there's more on the way. And at the price that they sell at, I think it's totally worth it compared to the contrast paints for Games Workshop. Don't get me wrong, I do own contrast paints, but I do have speed paints too, and I use the speed paints more than the contrast. So
you said that you'd like got into the hobby in 2001. Were you out it again for a while, or was that you like all the way through, if you like?
I wouldn't say I was strong all the way through since 2001. I played probably for a good 5 years, 2001 onward, 5 years-ish. Pretty strong. I remember we'd play about every second week when I got into it.
And that was 40k at that time?
Yeah, 40k was our jam. Played a lot of that. Then the gaming group broke up. People moved on. Some people got kids. I was young at the time. Well, young-ish. I wasn't young as some people as they got into the hobby, but yeah, and I moved away, and a few other people did too. So, and I dabbled. I constantly was building, tweaking, playing, just with models. Wasn't doing much. Trying to build terrain. But for the most part, it wasn't until I found actually Gaslands that kind of really re-sparked my love of hobby and tabletop. And that was the first edition of Gaslands before they had the Refueled. And once the Refueled hit, that really took off, and I introduced my family and we played, which was a lot of fun.
So once you got into that, did that kind of open the door to a few other games? I mean, you've talked about like Joe McCulloch's games, so is that kind of one thing led to finding them as well then?
Yeah, very much so. I stumbled across Frostgrave just when I remember finding it, learning about it right before the second edition came out. And I told my same buddy, which is fun, is nice. kind of on a side tangent, he has a small store in a small town, like a gaming store. So it's always nice to get him and support him, but it gives new ideas for his store too. And I told him about Frostgrave, and he's like, this is really cool. And then the second edition hit, and that's when I finally was able to pick up the book. And yeah, I haven't turned back. And I love how Joseph there has made his game just so unique and fun. It's, some people are like we were talking about earlier, it's kind of like a homage to Mordheim, but it's its own thing too. And it hit the market at the right time. It's, I think that's really what it helps. And the love is there for people. They love it because of the setting, and then they can make it their own. I've seen, whatever warband you want.
Do you use, when you're playing, like, say, Frostgrave, Stargrave, Rangers of Shadow Deep, do you use the scenarios, the pre-written scenarios, or do you have a go at sort of creating your own stuff as well?
I've used a lot of the pre-made scenarios, but I've also made my own. Not many, but a couple, or modified them. I've played Perilous Dark as the single player or co-op one for Frostgrave, which I highly recommend. It's totally worth it. I've played that one almost all the way through, and it's hard. The first mission is one of the hardest in it. So it will challenge you and cause you to die, which is a lot of fun, even with the challenges.
I'm rereading that book just now, actually, funnily enough, because I've got it myself, and I was mainly reading because it does two things, doesn't it? It's like a guide, not how to, but like ideas for doing your own stuff, but also there's scenarios in there. So I've not really dived into the scenarios yet, but I have been reading a lot of the different, because he talks about, like, how do you work monsters if you're playing solo or co-op, and talks about a lot about the table playing against you, traps and obstacles and tables and stuff, which I really like. I'm still wary of getting together, me and Robert. Like, it's so rare that we could actually get together and play a game. I'm hesitant to do something myself in case it just totally, if we were doing it every week, I would definitely try it, but I'm like, I'd feel safer turning up with like a scenario that Joe McCulloch had written, because I know that it'll at least be properly balanced and stuff and get us a couple hours game in.
That's fair. I remember him talking about the first scenario in Perilous Dark, and he says it's one of the hardest scenarios he's ever written. I remember hearing him interview about that, and I would have to agree. It is very hard.
What's hard about it then?
Just the way the snakes, because it calls for vapor snakes and a few constructs, and you have to get from one corner of the board to the other corner of the board. Well, and you're trying to go past everything, so it just makes it really hard to defeat them. And it's a D20, so it's very swingy, so you could roll really good and it'd be a half decent fight, or you could roll really bad and have half your warband dead by the time you hit the door. So, but I think that's what makes it so much fun. As hard as it is, it really brings you into that narrative. Gives you that joy of the game and makes your warband like really come alive.
And what warband are you using for that just now? If the Skaven are still on the painting table, then.
I actually have ran a Skaven warband, but I also have my original warband that I 3D printed and painted up completely, and that was a lot of fun. I can't remember what the wizard was. It might have been, I think it was a summoner. I found them very powerful because you could summon the demons and just release the demon on something and kind of sacrifice it as you run away.
I remember that from our game of Frostgrave. Like, I was, I think it had the apprentice. He stood there trying to summon a demon, repeatedly failed, and then I think somebody killed him. It was actually a bit pathetic.
Oh
Spent the whole game trying to do a thing, never managed to do it, got killed. But I suppose if you're going to be a magic user, that might happen. Do you think you'd ever be tempted to try a game like 40k again these days? Either in its old iteration or its modern one?
If I found the time and the right person, I think I would, yes. Because never say no to gaming. It really comes down to that. I think if I can find the right time and the right person is willing to put in that time, sure. But right now, a lot of my games are skirmish games because it's easier. You know, you paint up 10 minis, your opponent paints up 10 minis, or you don't have even all of them painted, and you're like, let's just play.
It's a much more achievable way to play a game, I find. Like, I couldn't imagine now trying to cart all the stuff needed for like a full game of Warhammer or something like that. I couldn't imagine carting all that stuff about. By the time you'd set it up and everything, I'd love to revisit that at some point, but I find it quite intimidating. Even just all the stuff that you would need for it as well.
Yeah, it's very intimidating. Like you said, it's the space you need, because a standard game is 1,500 points or whatever. For 40k, you need a 4x6 table. Now you got to put terrain on it. Your opponent has to have the same size of army, and then you got to lock in how long is that going to take? 3 to 4 hours. So yeah, a very big commitment. And I have young kids, so it's not going to happen very often. Maybe when they're older and I can sucker them in.
With on the Warhammer side of things, like I've got my 6mm stuff, and I think maybe the next game that we have after we do a replay of Blood Moon is going to be like a game of essentially Kings of War rules, but using the 6mm, because you really don't need that much stuff or that much room at all to do that, and you get that fix of doing the mass battle, but on a very small scale. So it's one way of doing it. I know it's not for everyone. Like, a lot of people just they won't veer away for 28mm at all. But I quite like the thought of doing that scale now and then. Have you ever dabbled in other scales?
Yes, yeah, I actually have. I've played BattleTech, and I have a bit of BattleTech, which is a totally different scale. That's a lot.
What scale is that?
I don't know. It's more 6mm. It's very much that 6mm. You can use your tanks and stuff that are 6mm for BattleTech, and I've printed a few. And BattleTech's been around just as long as Games Workshop. It's changed hands. It's had a few ups and downs, but it has a big cult following, and it's really big right now because they're bringing out a lot of plastic minis for it. So, yeah.
And have you done any terrain at that scale?
For myself, no. I have not built anything for that. I know I want to. I think that'd be fun. And a challenge, because it's a totally different scale in that regards. And then I've also done ship combat Battlefleet Gothic by Games Workshop back in the day. I picked that up, actually. I actually,
so that's spaceships.
Yeah, it's spaceships, and there's now a lot of spaceship games that you can play. So,
how did you find that?
Games Workshop. I found that one, and I saw it, and I bought the box set. I thought it was the coolest thing ever. So, and it was very unique, and it's a lot of fun. So, I still have the box up on the shelf, and I recently just had some fun, found some free models online, and I 3D printed those too. So
cool.
Yeah, I want to paint them up, but there's a long list.
We're slowly running out of time here, Ryan. But what's next for you? Like, in terms of, you got a game planned anytime soon of anything in the calendar?
Probably not any official games planned. I know Christmas is here, so it's going to affect a lot of people. Hopefully, maybe over the Christmas holidays, I'll get some Gaslands in with the brother-in-law and father-in-law. They actually enjoy that. a wee bit, so I'll bring that along when I go see them. But other than that, probably just keep plugging away at my train, getting the videos prepped, and sadly it won't be ready in time, I don't think. But yeah, new year.
And what about the YouTube channel? Like, I'll obviously put a link in the show notes to it, but is there an easy link for the listener to find that? Because you get YouTube handles now, don't you?
Yeah, just Adventure Built Gaming.
Adventure Built Gaming.
Yeah.
And what's going to be coming up next on the channel?
Hopefully the Mordheim building that I'm building. I've teased it a few times. I know I've shown a few friends and they're like, that's amazing. So that's the plan. I really like the building that's coming together and the techniques I've used. I've used techniques that I've used on old videos and some new stuff that I've kind of come up with. So yeah.